G'day, my name is Peter Coco and I am the CEO and founder of Vleppo. Today's report is all about all things Po.et. We just released our research note earlier on today. This video is designed to provide some context and some colour around the assessment process that we applied to Po.et and provide some substantiation for our findings. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get into it. As you saw at the start of this video, with regards to the disclaimer, this information is in no way, shape or form advice. It's not personal advice, it's not general advice, it's not spiritual advice, it's not advice on how you feed your dog. Effectively, the information here is specifically intended to be used in conjunction with the research report from a contextual basis. So that's about it from that. And before I go delving into the Po.et assessment, I think the right place to begin is just to have a bit of a conversation about digital assets. And the reason why digital assets certainly interests Vleppo is that our operating model is effectively based firmly on the ability for us to be able to extend credit against said digital assets. So with regards to the market for digital assets, you kind of have two typical issues that you run into in almost any sort of digital asset. The first one is around the establishment of the ownership, so property rights, and the second one is around enforceability of those property rights. Establishment of the property rights is quite often a bit of an issue with regards to digital assets, primarily because of the ease at which they can be plagiarized or ripped off, so on and so forth. And obviously enforceability becomes a bit of an issue with regards to, well, we live in a global economy, transactions happen cross-border all the time, and on that basis it comes down to how does somebody in practical terms enforce their rights when somebody on the other side of the world has effectively taken their IP. So that leads me to the Po.et solution. So Po.et is a company that has come up with a solution whereby creators of digital content, such as newspaper articles or videos or songs, what they can do is they can actually register their ownership of that asset in the Po.et protocol. So what happens is that John might do a video of a tree, which that's a fairly riveting sort of an example, but one nonetheless. The video could then be, as a piece of content, entered into the blockchain through the Po.et protocol, whereby it is given its unique signature, which ties that asset to the creator of the asset, and also gives it a timestamp. And certainly, with regards to my experience with intellectual property, that timestamp is absolutely crucial because the person who has the earliest timestamp, by definition, owns the IP as a general rule. I'm sure there's IP lawyers out there that will be able to give a far more flowery and much more expensive explanation than I've just given you there. So Po.et enables that line in the sand to be drawn whereby the creators of a digital asset can establish their ownership of that asset, and then consequently, once you've established ownership of an asset, you're able to then pursue your rights and much more easily monetize those assets. So from that perspective, the solution is an interesting one, and I think quite timely too, given that the market for digital assets is exploding, and as quickly as we think we can define it, a new digital assets type has come out. So in practical terms though, then an additional benefit to the Po.et protocol from what we can ascertain is that at the point that the creator of the digital asset sells the rights to that asset, either under a license agreement or whatever, that transaction and that transference of the rights to the asset can also be immortalized within the protocol, and that enables a couple of things to happen. Firstly, the transaction is being recognized and it's being immortalized within the protocol. But the second thing is, and this is more from the buyer's perspective, the buyer can enter into this transaction with the full knowledge that the person that's selling the asset actually owns it. So when you have two parties to a transaction who have certainty around the rules on how something like this is going to be governed, that naturally leads to a more liquid marketplace with more certainty and less volatility. And property rights at the end of the day is a core requirement for transactional efficiency. I just would like to quickly explore some of the assessment criteria that we've used and we've found with Po.et. So Po.et scored strongly with regards to governance and transparency. They certainly come across in their public communications as being well in control of their remit. Their transparency is something that you don't always see with a crypto play as such. So overall, from that perspective, it's quite a strong and quite a punchy sort of a company from what we can tell. From a financial standpoint, that's the only one where we've got some reservations, and that's more just around the operating model and the monetization. We're just a little bit unsure of exactly how that works. That being said, we've shaded the financial score more as a prudential move than anything. What's interesting also about what Po.et's done is this partnership that it has with Maven is quite an intelligent move, really, because what that enables Po.et to be able to do is to secure access to a ready supply, and it's quite a large supply of creators of digital assets, all of whom will now benefit from their ability to be able to register their ownership and have that line in the sand drawn within Po.et. And I think as time goes by, that partnership will more than likely yield some fairly good outcomes for both parties going forward, assuming that the relationship works in the long run. Overall, from my perspective, it looks to be quite a strong company. The Vleppo team, as I said, they've reviewed it and determined that yes, it is an acceptable asset for us to consider lending against. And to that end, we extended a provisional LVR score or LVR value of 20%. So that, in a nutshell, is our take on Po.et. Just a quick call out to any companies out there who may wish to undertake our assessment process to see whether their tokens are of sufficient quality for us to consider lending against. If you're at all interested in doing that, please drop us an email at research@vleppo.io. And for anybody who's interested in this sort of research or any other research that we're doing on a number of other companies, you can follow us in the social media channels, which are readily accessible to you via vleppo.io. Look, thanks again very much for your time, and we'll produce our next piece of the research in the next couple of days. Alrighty, thanks again. My name is Peter Coco, and this is Vleppo.